House considers the ones the Senate considered first, and they try to normally finish up, around the middle of June, so that we can try and finish by the middle of July in getting the budgets completed. But after they pass both houses, they normally go to a conference committee made up of 3 members of each, the House and Senate, and they try to work out the differences along with the executive branch.
Now, when we talk about budgets, there's really lots of them out there. There is one big state budget, but you just mentioned all these committees that meet in the different departments. How many departments are there, and maybe what are a couple of the larger departments and the kinds of budgets that they might have?
Well, there are 19 departments of state government, and the largest budgets, as you know, are first and foremost the K-12 school aid budget, which is about $13 billion in that range. And after that is the Department of Community Health, which contains the Medicaid program, and the total spending on that, including federal monies, is about $8 billion. And then after that, it's higher education, corrections, state police. We appropriate money for every department, and most of them have their separate bills. There are some bills that, there's one bill that deals with what we refer to as just the general bureaucracy, and that's the legislature, the governor's office, the attorney general, the secretary of state, and a couple of the smaller departments, the Department of Management and Budget and Civil Rights. They end up in the general government budget. But I think the big ones, for the most part, are K-12, community health, corrections, higher education, human services, and each of those budgets, there is a subcommittee that deals with them, and I know you've been on, I think, community health and human services, 2 very important budgets in my mind.
Yeah, and I've always enjoyed that part, and it is really amazing to me when you just list 5 or 6 of those budgets. That is a very large part of our overall state budget. A lot of folks, when they understand that maybe 80%, 90% of our budget is you could find within 5 or 6 different budgets, the ones you just named. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I tell people that if you look at the discretionary spending of state government, we have $9.7 billion of general fund money that we spend most of our time trying to figure out how we're going to dispense. And much of the restricted funds are dedicated to certain sources, and there's probably a little less time spent on that because they're either constitutionally or statutorily earmarked. But the discretionary money, of that $9.7 billion, $8 billion of it is in departments. $2.5 billion is spent on Medicaid, matching federal money that helps us ensure that we get that $8 billion to fund a healthcare system for those that don't have insurance or the poor. And so $2.5 billion of our general fund budget is spent on Medicaid. $2 billion of it is spent on corrections. $2 billion of it is spent on higher education, and that includes community colleges and all of our scholarship and programs. Then we have about $700 million in the Department of Human Services that are spent specifically on family independence programs, grant programs, and ensuring that we take care of foster children, juveniles, and direct payments that are very difficult for us to do without. I mean, they're all programs that I think everybody would agree are important that we maintain. So after that, we have about $300 million in debt service that you can't cut. Once we've sold bonds, we need to pay off those bonds. We have $300 million in debt service. We have $300 million in the state police, and then there's about $300 million that funds the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive branch, the executive office. So, of those things, you get up to $8 billion, and for the most part, when you start talking about cuts, the cuts end up coming out of that remaining $1.7 billion, and those are the departments of natural resources and environmental quality and civil rights. But I think for the most part, people try to avoid cutting in the state police, avoid, corrections. We think, there probably ought to be some reforms enacted there, but for the most part, we know that judges sentence people to prison. We need to maintain those prisons, and most of the people there, we don't want back wandering the streets before the judges said they ought to be out. So
Right.
we need to maintain those systems, and higher education, as you know, is very important. We have about $8 billion of that funds 4 or 5 things in state government, and then the $1.7 billion funds the rest of it, and that's pretty amazing, I think, to most people when they think about it.
Yeah, well, you've covered a lot of territory there. I do want to kind of now switch to that money has to come from somewhere, and I have this nice card that shows me, all the different revenue sources and where they come from. But I think for the folks watching, they might be interested in, how do we decide how much money that we're going to put into this budget? And again, we both know there's this process, and it's a very lengthy process, but if you could describe a little bit of what you and I know is maybe the consensus revenue sharing estimating process, or how do we come up with how much we're going to try to put into the budget as far as the numbers?
As we plan the budget and as you deliberate the budget, we're all pretty dependent on economists, and recently the University of Michigan, their research seminar on quantitative economics, held their annual forecast for the United States economy and Michigan's economy. And then after the University of Michigan does their estimates and their forecast on what's going to happen in Michigan's economy, then the Treasury Department, the House and Senate Fiscal Agency, and their economists sit down and tell us what the revenues are going to be. And those are estimates. And that's why it's called the Revenue Estimating Conference. No economist is ever going to tell you, exactly what revenues are going to be. I joke with the state treasurer that someday I want to meet a one-handed economist, because they pretty much always give me, well, on one hand we're going to have this much, but it could, on the other hand, we could have this much.
Yeah.
So when they get together, they agree on generally what the number is going to be. And they have 2 revenue estimating conferences a year, one in January, upon which we build the governor's original budget by law, and then one in May, where we try, as we get closer to the beginning of the fiscal year, we try to make sure we adjust revenues and budgets for each of those departments. And we go through what you know as a target setting process. And target setting is when the legislature, both houses of the legislature, sit down with the administration and try and decide how much is going to be spent in each department based on the most recent estimates of what revenues are going to be. And as you know, over the last couple of years, those estimates have varied considerably. Yes. From January to May, and from May to the following January. We have had, certainly unexpected occurrences here in this last year. But I think Michigan, because of our over-dependence on manufacturing, has suffered a lot more than other states. And, the economists so far have not estimated conservatively enough until this last year. And I think this last year, when they put their last revenue estimates together in May, they were very conservative. And, we finished the 2008 budget year with a positive balance. Some people think we finished with too much of a positive balance, but as somebody who has to manage and make sure that we don't overspend, I take it as a positive sign that we finished with positive revenues. But we built the '09 budget on no revenue growth, and in 2010 we're anticipating actually a reduction. And as we look around and see what's going on